Hey everybody, welcome to the Monday edition of The Daily Friend. Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. Sports-wise, interesting results, but we're not here for that. What we're here to do is to discuss the week. And of course, you can always find our writing in terms of news, opinion, and analysis on the Daily Friend website. That's dailyfriend.co.za. And in this episode, I have faces who I think we haven't seen in a while, but I'm glad they're back. Guys, good morning. We have firstly Nicholas Lorimer, who's our writer and analyst here at the IR. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing very well, Sinclair.
And of course, we have Gabriel Krauser, a face you guys are quite used to, and also another contributor, writer, and analyst, here at the IR. Brother, how are you doing?
Good, man. How's it, Sinclair?
Excellento. And last but definitely not least, with the arms folded, which I've seen you guys make comments about.
Sorry.
We have Marius Ruiz, who's the head of campaign and also a very solid writer and analyst here at IR.
Thanks, Sinclair. I'll try a better body language.
We just had some comments before saying, why is that guy always so angry? Like, he's not. Trust me, he's not. Guys, good morning. It's a interesting start to the week. I think there'll be a lot in this news cycle and really right now, as we speak, Jacob Zuma is appearing before the Zondo Commission. Of course, Jacob Zuma used to be the president of South Africa and is implicated in a whole bunch of, let's call it rent-seeking events that are tied to what the media have termed state capture. Guys, I'm going to hop straight into this one and ask the following question. Should we expect anything meaningful by Jacob Zuma's appearance at the State Commission? Gabriel?
I think we should expect that. That is the kind of standard that we should hold our public representatives to. That's also the kind of standard that we should hold our commissions of inquiry to, that they have meaningful results. I think so far, however, there's a lot of reason to think that those expectations are not going to be met by reality. We were talking about Jacob Zuma just off air, sort of posting something on Twitter, a video of himself going, Zuma must fall, like it's a big
taking the
joke.
mickey out of it.
You
know, and Nicholas, there's something I think anybody who's watching this is just thinking, okay, I don't like the fact that I'm hearing, Big Daddy's tone suggest that maybe there might not be anything meaningful in this. The fact is, there've been no arrests, no prosecutions, and yes, the Zondo Commission is sort of, chugging along quite nicely, but should we really expect to see any real consequences?
No, because the state it's at the moment, the web of corruption in the state is a lot like the mafia. Everyone has dirt on everyone else. And if one person takes the fall, they can probably take almost everyone down with them. And also, once you create the precedent that someone can go down, someone big can go down in a meaningful way for corruption, you open the door to almost everyone being a vulnerable target. Until one faction of the ANC has complete control of the state apparatus, which there isn't currently that unified control by any faction, they can't risk it. Only if one faction was to emerge completely victorious and have full control of the prosecuting authorities and the police could they begin to move against their opponents and take some of them down for corruption. But that's not going to happen for a long time.
And I think that should worry us as liberals, because at the heart of any functional society is the idea of, firstly, a separation of powers and a meaningful implementation or adherence, to the rule of law. The idea that, action is guided by, our action should be sort of guided by law, and when we break the law, that there should be consequences.
Consequences, full on. I mean, that is the missing ingredient in the South African kind of glorious rest pot of fabulousness. No consequences, like no salt. Everything else doesn't really work. I think that it's worth noting in terms of what Nicholas was saying, that Jacob Zuma was basically the head of the sort of intelligence services within the ANC during its period in exile and during the transition to democracy. So if anyone has dirt on a whole bunch of other people, it's going to be Jacob Zuma. But on the other hand, I think it's also worth noting that the National Prosecuting Authority under Cyril Ramaphosa has so far been quite toothless. So from the Zondo Commission, as far as I'm aware, the only charges that have really been brought forward afresh have been against a Greasy, was that his name? The guy at Sasa. he comes forward, he says, mea culpa, I was taken in by this cult. I believed that this was all ultimately for the greater good, but what I was really doing was delivering crates of whiskey to politicians in order for them to keep the tender process going forward so that we can feed the prisoners. I mean, this is a crazy kind of, in a way, a class of society that should really be on the front of our mind, because we want more prisoners. We want the politicians to be going to jail, not making money out of jail. And yet, when he comes forward and says, look, I've got all this documentation, I've got this testimony, I've got this expert knowledge, I can be the guy. You can, I'm the flip guy. You want someone to flip and then expose everyone else, but then, of course, it means exposing himself. You've got someone. What happens? He's the guy who gets prosecuted. He doesn't get taken in by the prosecuting authority and saying, well, look, give us these affidavits and we're going to go to town on the guys that are still in charge. Instead, it's like, we're going to go after you. So far a bit toothless. And I think the bigger picture reason to expect that it'll remain so is the fact that this is not about, is that our criminal justice system seems increasingly not to be about bringing consequences to bear upon the guilty, but rather is about kind of protecting. If you've got your hands on the levers of power, moving them around so that you create a shield around yourself.
Maurice, I'm going to bring you in here because I'm thinking of this famous scene from the movie Life that had Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. And there's one little scene where Eddie Murphy goes, if anybody takes my cornbread, there's going to be some consequences and repercussions up in here. But one gets the impression that the ANC has eroded our public institutions, specifically those that are crime fighting and the ones that dispense or administer justice, to the point where really maybe anybody listening to us is going, okay, I don't see anything likely going to happen to someone like a Jacob Zuma or any of
I think you're right. I mean, I think that's a point Gabriel made. What's missing in South Africa is there's no real equality before the law. If you're hype enough in the ANC, you'll get away with quite a lot of stuff. I mean, that's one thing where we are different from a lot of other countries. I mean, Brazil has just sent Lula, who was one of their most popular presidents at one stage, to jail. Something like every second South Korean president has gone to jail. So, but in South Africa, it's almost unthinkable to think that Jacob Zuma will go to jail, because who knows what chaos would be unleashed if he did actually have to face a prison term. So, and that's also quite scary. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there would be a threat of violence. We saw what happened in Durban with Mayugumedi when there was basically there was civil unrest in the streets of Durban because people wanted to reinstate, even though there's so much evidence that she is corrupt and she's actually used a position for very bad things. Exactly, 100%.
I'll bring you in. One thing to add as you comment, does this filter, and this is a bit of a generic question, but does it filter down into the society then? I mean, look at the Cape Flats right now, and I'm sorry to bring this up, I know we didn't discuss this, but I want us to sort of chip in. Are the gangs therefore, when they hear, the army is going to be rolled in, do they fear the rule of law just because?
Well, I think they've got reason to fear the army, but I do think that there's very strong prima facie reason for them to think that they've got friends in the police. I think one of the most sort of earth-shattering stories, really the most emotionally moving story in Jacques Poe's book, The President's Keepers, was quite far away from SARS and the National Prosecuting Authority and the intelligence services, which is sort of what most people focused on, but rather was about a thing called Operation Impi, where a couple of police officers down in the Western Cape had discovered that they were managing to make arrests against gangsters who were killing people, including women and children. And they were tracing the guns and seeing the sort of ballistics of this gun is tracing back to a gun that's already been taken by the police. Then they did a bit of a sting operation. They found a guy, I think in Joburg or
Chris Princely.
Yes. Yeah. A police officer was selling guns to gangsters from the police stockade. Thousands, literally, and they were connected to thousands of murders. So, are the gangsters in the Western Cape afraid of the police? No, I think they've got a lot of them on the books. And in my experience with sort of dealing with policing in central Johannesburg, I've gone around on ride-arounds or ride-alongs with police officers who've gone and visited all the known brothels and drug dealing dens and kind of places in places like Hillbrow, and they're sort of there to collect brown paper envelopes rather than to do things. So I think it does filter down all the way to the bottom, and I think that our surveys kind of indicate that. But Mark Data, which is run by R.W. Johnson, they had a couple of big surveys, and they found that the police was the least trusted institution in the entire country. I don't think many of our viewers, unless they sort of live in Twitter, are going to be surprised to hear that, you know, when you're worried, the police aren't the first thing that comes to mind in terms of a solution to the problem. Usually the first thing that comes to mind is a neighbor or your own means of self-defense,
which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, and if you're looking for consequences for the crooks down the line, there's very little faith in the criminal justice system delivering that from the top to the bottom.
I mean, there's Afrikaans saying, "Vis vat van sy kop," and I think that's. I mean, it's like 100%. If there's no consequence for the people at the top, it definitely 100%. I mean, it's kind of broken windows theory as well, you know.
Absolutely, guys. We're going to move on, but something which I think is linked to this. You know, we sort of segued, or we can segue into it by making the case that we've been discussing the weakness and the erosion of Chapter 9 institutions. And one which has been splashed on the front pages of weekend papers, the Sunday Times in particular, we have a copy on here, was the story, a weird story of a Rastafarian gentleman who was essentially used, according to what's being alleged in the paper, you know, as a major witness for the public protector in her findings towards, against Pravin Gordhan.
Yeah.
Gabriel, talk to us.
Okay, let me talk you through the story as I read it. So it seems a little bit like Busisiwe Mkhwebane, the new public protector under Ramaphosa, has been going after Pravin Gordhan, saying the rogue unit story is true. Now, remember, the Sunday Times published, I think, about 100 articles pushing the rogue unit story, saying Pravin Gordhan, a few other Indians and some whites and SARS were doing terrible things, and then even tricking black people into doing it too, basically going after black people to put them down. I think was the thought was that this is essentially a sort of racist project to go after people like Edward Zuma, connected to Jacob Zuma. In fact, the Sunday Times came to realize that a lot of its information had been falsely provided, some of the investigation hadn't been properly done, and they said, we're sorry. They put a big mea culpa out there, and now are running the story that the rogue unit story is false. As an aside, the city press has sort of filled the vacuum, and now they're saying the rogue unit story is true, and this kind of coincides with the EFF chanting, trying to hound Pravin Gordhan out of parliament last week. So Busisiwe Mkhwebane has this story about, I found a source inside. Now, where was the rogue unit? It used to be thought it was in the VIP Special Investigative Unit, then it was in the Special Investigation Separate Unit. Where is the rogue unit? What is it really? Well, she kind of came to discover it was something called the CBC unit, the Customs Border Control Unit. This is really where the rogue unit was. And she finds a source inside the Customs Border Control Unit, which says that people had been trained in the SARS body to do things like tracings, tracker installations, weapon handling, bugging systems, sleep deprivation, surveillance, physical, mobile, and electronic systems breaching, house penetration, and cryptology. So
sounds like the Gestapo.
Is serious stuff, huh?
For reference, this is supposedly our receiver of revenue that has all of this supposedly in it.
All of this stuff going on in it, and that using illegal methods, including stealing from residencies, dumpster diving, a little bit like Murray and Tam did to the EFF, interception of emails, mobile and landlines, extraction of bank statements, and installation of tracker systems. So, I mean, this is heavy spy stuff. Hey, James Bond is like, she found James Bond. She found that James Bond is saying, here's the rogue unit, watch out.
Serial going to be made 007.
Yeah.
Just kidding, stay calm.
So, and the secret source is one Keletso Manyike. Now, Jacques Poe, I think, saw this and was like, well, this is fabulous. It's amazing because he knows all of the people and none of them have spoken anything about this. So he thought, let me give Mr. Keletso Manyike a phone call. Well, Mr. Keletso Manyike turns out to be a Rastafarian dude who smokes a lot of marijuana, which I'm all for, by the way. And
no, never.
And he says,
we never would have guessed.
And he says, I have no idea about the rogue unit. What happened? I used to be like a shop floor steward at SARS. I used to have a small little administration job. I did some translating. Then there was a labor dispute, and my lawyers sort of advised me to get any information that I could about SARS. So he cited some 2010 rogue unit report, kind of one of the reports that had the Sunday Times fooled from the beginning. And so he just recites this report, but she, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, then uses this as fresh information. And Jacques Poe asks Mr. Manyike, why do you think she thinks that you are an expert? He says, well, I don't know. She never phoned me. She never spoke to me. He says, but why does she think you're an expert? He says, I don't know, man. maybe she got a little bit confused.
Sloppy investigative work. I mean,
This is the public protector.
She's
He's
quite-
quoting a Rastafarian, dope-smoking, chilled guy as being James Bond and like running the ultimate spy service to bring down people like
and
Edward
you know
Zuma.
what it is, Gabriel, and I think I'm going to bring you guys in very briefly on this as we look to move on. It comes back to a rapidly eroding trust of the veracity and reliability of Mkhwebane as the public protector, who already has, is it 4 or is it 5 judgments against her, overturning the findings of her reports. Like, that just cannot continue, can it, Nicholas?
Well, what was interesting about the history of the public protector here is Tudi Malansere gave it all of this prestige and reputation and goodwill, some of which was deserved, some of which was not deserved. And now that kind of seems to have awakened something in the political forces. They realized that the public protector could be this great instrument. So they made sure that the next appointment would be one who was captured. And now it's very clear that that the public protector is involved in some kind of political machinations, and because it looks to me from the poor work done on this report that the conclusion was reached and then she went back to look for evidence.
And guys, we're going to move on, but there's something you raised earlier on, Gabriel, which I think was super important insofar as this issue and how it ties on to what we're going to discuss just now. Yes, Pravin Gordhan, insofar as the allegations being made against him here, is likely, when he takes it as he has, or as he is, taking this on review, will likely,
Be vindicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. But he won't be vindicated on a point that we've been making in this studio quite a lot, insofar as some of the other issues where he, as an ideologue, a leftist communist ideologue, is driving the sort of bad policy that is getting a lot of South Africans in trouble economically and financially. And I'm going to segue onto this one because we wanted to chat about prescribed assets, this policy the ANC is proposing to essentially confiscate your pension fund. And use it, or have politicians decide, where the investment can be. I mean, so suddenly your pension fund, which is currently with Momentum or Discovery or whoever, can be used to prop up a 20 billion rand in the red Eskom or Sanrail or Transnet or any failing SOE. Pravin is at the center of driving those sort of policy proposals as the Communist Party within the ANC and obviously as a minister within the economic cluster. So we don't absolve him from that, do we?
No, not at all. And I think that he's really flattered by this continual sort of vilification of him as some secretly corrupt, nasty kind of guy. Pravin Gordhan, all the credible evidence suggests that Pravin Gordhan is an honest bloke.
Yep.
Pravin Gordhan has not got his fingers in the till, and he doesn't tolerate other people who do. Pravin Gordhan is a hard worker. I myself, the day that he was fired by Jacob Zuma, I was there in Pretoria that day. There were 100 other people there protesting and toy-toying. The next week there were 10,000. The next week there were 50,000. Those were the big Zuma must fall protests marching to Parliament, and we had every reason to do that. Taking out good, honest people based on fake accusations of rogue unit, hana. This is not good. But one thing is whether you got your money and fingers in the till. The other thing is, are you kind of crazy when it comes to evaluating the greatest sort of priorities that this country has? And Pravin Gordhan might be honest, but he's like honestly a fool. Last year, one of the things we keep talking about with Eskom is the board. Is the board good? Is it bad? I think I've got a lot of respect for Jabu Mabuza, the CEO of the Eskom board. Last year, he said that they're 33% redundant. He's basically calling for, he said, I don't want downsizing, I want right sizing. What is he saying? He's saying, obviously, I can't speak in a nasty way, but we need to cut things down.
He's not wrong.
He took like a philosophical view on the bargained wage increases. He was sort of very sympathetic to the wages being frozen. Who came and stepped in? Who messed it up? Not the board, the government, in particular Pravin Gordhan, as the administrator of the state-owned enterprises. He said they need wage increases beyond inflation and they need all of the numbers to be kept. Pravin Gordhan has also said that SAA can fly. Don't privatize it. We're going to make money from it yet, although we keep bailing it out with billions and billions of rands.
The CEO just left as well.
So he's an honest fool. And I think that it's a very big problem for if this country continues to be distracted, I think it's great that the story is on the cover of the Sunday Times, but it's kind of a funny story. It's a story about quis custodes ipsos custodiates, who guards the guardians. Well, the police should guard us. Who should guard the police? It should be the public protector. Instead, the public protector is just messing things up. But that's one story. The other story is people coming after your money in this legitimate way called communism. And Pravin Gordhan is at the head of that. And let's just not forget that last week, firstly, a month ago, Ibrahim Patel said that this is kind of what we're going to do. And last week, the PIC said, we would like to they've got 2 trillion rands worth of assets. That is where most of the wealth in this country is. They're sitting on state pension grants. They already own 86 billion rands worth of Eskom debt. They said we want to turn it into equity. Now, Jabu Mabuza, again, the head of the Eskom board, he said last year, this is a very bad idea. If someone has loaned us money and they're getting a coupon, that's what debt is. You get a monthly repayment. And then you swap that for equity, where you're getting a dividend. So if we make profits, you get something. If we make a loss, you get nothing. Then this doesn't make sense if you're talking about a loss-making company, which is what we are. If we try and convert debt to equity amongst some of our debt holders, the rest of the debt holders are going to run away. It's going to make it much worse for us, because this is an unreasonable thing to do. No one would want to have equity in Eskom because it's a loss-making enterprise. Now, the PIC is calling for it again. Under whom? Under Gordhan, basically, because Treasury is who's supposed to be managing this. I don't think Tito Mboweni likes the idea, but he can't voice himself too much. Why? Because his deputy is a communist called Dr. David Masondo, the sort of great intellectual communist of Ramaphosa's allies, and he clearly thinks that the state needs to own everything. The state owning the means of production is the basic ideology of socialism, and this is the last step of the National Democratic Revolution. It's not the state letting go and letting free enterprise reign. It is for them to hold on to what they already have and take more. Take your money. Take your pension.
Gabriel, I want to bring in Nick here, because I think you've literally brought in all the elements that I think must be discussed to this. And Pravin is just one of those players that are involved here. Nick, it really is an ideologue and really ideology at the heart of the corruption, if you will, of financial institutions, and ever increasingly the growing number of predatory politicians who are basically finding another way, as Gabriel was saying, of stealing your money.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, firstly, that was a fantastic rant. Thank you. And secondly, I'm going to borrow heavily from our CEO, Frans Cronje here. Yeah. The ANC seems to be in a position now where a lot of the reformers or anyone who's sort of more pragmatic has been pushed aside. And they've disappeared, they've left, they've trickled away. And now we're stuck between 2 versions of the ANC. Honest communists who want to, as Gabriel says, take over the commanding heights of the economy, and sort of looter, Zumarite, Ace Makashule types who are not so, they might nationalize something, but the goal is to extract money from the fiscus for themselves. And it's really an impossible position. And unless something changes, we're going to be in serious trouble, because something has to, we're going to run out of money unless we start looting things very soon.
Absolutely.
And that's going to cause a lot of damage to a lot of people's lives.
And Morris, I want to bring you in here, because for me, the central issue here, and the one thing I want people to take away, is the idea that ever increasingly politicians are putting in place or putting forward policy proposals that are designed to loot from their pockets. Now, initially, we know that the government has squeezed as much out of our incomes as it possibly can by way of taxation. Now it's going after people's wealth. And we began the segment by talking about the proposed policy of prescribed assets. Morris, as the IRR, I know we have a campaign against this. Talk to us. How can people begin to fight back against the bad policy proposals?
Well, what people can do is support our campaign to protect your pensions. So they can go to our website, irr.org.za. There will be a
pensions tab.
Pensions tab that you can go to. There you can support us, and there's a letter that all you have to do is put in your pension fund administrator's name and email, and something will go to them and ask them what they are doing to protect your pension. And we'll also be considering a legal challenge if this does happen. So at the moment, of course, prescribed assets is not government policy, but one thing we've realized is if the government says it's going to do something, you better believe it. And so if it's a bad policy, you got to push back against it. And sorry, I just want to go back to, we were talking about the pragmatists earlier. I mean, Tito Mboweni is probably the most pragmatic guy in the cabinet at the moment, and that tells you something, because he's not really, but also he seems to be on his way out as well. He doesn't seem to, there are rumors that he won't be around for much longer, and so it could well be that the next finance minister is David Masondo, who Gabriel so eloquently told us is a communist. So, but he is. I mean, he's literally on the SACP.
Yeah.
He's on the Central Committee. So
Not
he's
accusing
a
him of something.
Yeah, he's a communist. This isn't they're in the 50s in America.
I'd recommend our readers go and look up stuff he's written about
Yeah.
the sort of the revolution and the working class and stuff, and it makes for exciting reading.
And
Exciting in the bad sense of the term.
Yes.
And we're going to do final thoughts just now, and we'll keep it very, very brief. But guys, I think, and I must drum this in because we're talking about fellow South Africans here, people who have, in the grand scheme of things, they've done the right thing. They worked, they looked after their families, they paid their bills and their debts, and they've saved. They've saved their money
It's not easy
into
in this
their
country,
pensions.
and they've done it.
This includes, of course, the conversation around, we talk a lot about it being state funds when you talk about the PAC. No, these are state employees who've been saving and are putting their money aside. And any form of or any threat against their savings, their pensions, we should call out. And on this point, look out for the big Liberty Show this week on the 17th, which is a Wednesday. I'll be having this conversation in detail with Mike Schussler, and he'll break it down in very vivid terms as to why this is a threat. And I'm going to come back to you, Marius, very quickly as your final thoughts. Just a reminder to the viewers, how can they get involved in the campaign? How can we begin to fight back?
So as I said, they can go to our website, rrr.org.za, go to the pension tab, and they can also actually SMS the name or the word pension and their name to 32823. That'll be a way to get into the fight too. So, and I think just on one point in the PRC, remember that government employees' pensions are guaranteed. So that means if PRC runs out of money, ordinary taxpayers are going to have to pay that money as well. So
Or they're going to borrow.
exactly. So, but can the government? If you include Eskom debt, I think the government's debt to GDP ratio is already 90%, which is
It's pretty much a year's GDP worth of debt.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is like.
Gabriel, final thoughts on this topic, really, as we wrap up.
Yeah, so I just want to say to people out there who are concerned about this, there is obviously a reason if you're concerned to kind of keep your head under the parapet. If you say something, then maybe you're going to be singled out. People are going to say, why are you doubting the government's ability to manage things properly? Are you some kind of racist? Or are you some kind of anti-socialist person? Or are you some kind of
Anti-revolutionary.
counter-revolutionary.
Or you're counter-revolutionary. And if you're a company, you might worry about being regulated more heavily. If you're a private entity, you might worry about sort of SARS coming and knocking on your door. There are real rogue units out there in the world. Although our SARS was once credible, it might fall apart and become just that. So people have all kinds of reasons to be worried about putting their heads above the parapet. Here's what happens. If everyone does it, then that worry becomes radically different. You can't be singled out. Here's another thing that IRR provides a great value in. We are able to take the hit. It's our job to make the counter arguments. If people accuse us falsely of fake, stupid things, we've got plenty of smart writers here who bring out the research and who persuasively put the word out there that's not who we are. And when it comes to the pension schemes, they themselves are in this awkward position where they don't want to be too regulated, so they kind of want to play nice with the government, but they kind of don't like it. If we can put more pressure on them and turn more of them, some of them have already been turned, if we can turn more of them, they will provide the most direct pressure against the government, both inside the PIC, because there's some good guys still left there, and inside the private market to put the pressure there. So it does start with you, but we are like the shield. We can be your shield. We are the gathering within which you are somewhat protected from the potential negative consequences.
Nick, final thoughts.
The only way to stop this is to change the balance of forces.
Yep. Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you for watching this another episode of The Daily Friend. I hope you guys are loving this content because we love talking to you guys, and you can continue this conversation and do so by supporting these lads by becoming a friend of the IRR. That is our crowdfunding campaign where you can join the many other South Africans who are donating between 70 and 90 Rand a month. 2 or 3 cups of coffee. I don't know how much coffee costs these days. Don't at me. But you can just donate that 90 Rand a month, and I mean it when I say this. It gets every single one of us into the fight, and it gets us around the country meeting people like you. So you can become a friend of the IRR or join the campaign by SMSing your name to 32823. Terms and conditions to apply. An SMS will cost you 1 Rand. Or hey, you don't like SMSs? That's okay. Find us online at irr.org.za/join, and you can sign up your monthly debit order there. Guys, thank you so much for watching the show. We'll see you on Wednesday on The Daily Friend.